Morning, everyone. Dwayne Theobald for Colloquy number 2. These are going to be my responses to a couple people. So my first response, I do want to comment briefly on Mark Hendrick's video. Mark, entertaining as always. I really hope you had a good time in Amherst, or however it's pronounced. I hope the Writing Institute was really great for you, and hope you learned a lot and you found great success there. First of all, I want to say I appreciate that you talked about the text Between Shades of Grey. That out of all the ones we read for this module, that was the one that I think stuck with me the most, and of course it's meant to. It's a very powerful text. I've read a lot of texts, a lot of novels written about imprisonment and of course the Holocaust in particular, texts like that, such as Night, Number of the Stars, but this one in particular really stuck with me. It's one of those that I think it's one that could bear a reread, to be able to pick up additional things within the text. So one of the things you mentioned I want to talk about briefly was the notion of names. That some people are given names. We actually find out their names, such as those in the NKVD, and Nikolai being an example. And then there are some characters that are very prevalent in the text, but we never really get an actual name, such as Dwayne, Mark, something like that. And those characters being, the bald man, the man who winds his watch, the repeater, etc. And one of the things you mentioned, I believe you mentioned it, was the idea that those who are not given names, such as the bald man, the man who winds his watch, the idea there is that their characteristics are made very prevalent, and that they are. I think it's very easy to, I would almost argue, kind of visually see these characters the way that they're described. The way Sepetus, that's how you pronounced her name, the way Sepetus really describes them in the text. She does a fantastic job of that. So it's the notion that their characteristics are what's really important, and I would even argue their actions, the way that they act, the way that they behave, that is what's really the most important. I think that's what Sepetus is trying to highlight for us, that their actions and the way they behave are what are the most influential for the text, and of course to Lena and to her family, versus someone like Nikolai, who, while Nikolai is a very he does hold a lot of influence in the text and is mentioned quite a few times, he's probably not as important to Lena and to the text as a whole. The people who are around Lena a lot and who really directly influence her life are the other prisoners that are around her and how she interacts with them. And then, Mark, you also mentioned the idea or the notion that we really never get any drawings from Lena in the text, and that's something I really hadn't thought about. With Alexi's text, Junior or Arnold provides a lot of different drawings for us, both cartoon and more three-dimensional. And Arnold states up front very early in the text that those drawings, that's the best way for him to communicate. Nothing can be misconstrued or misunderstood through a drawing. Visually you can see what it is and it should be clearly understood. Versus with Lena, we never really get any drawings from her in the text, which is interesting because she is someone who states up front she has artistic talent. She is talented, she has that ability, but we never really get to see any of her drawings. And I almost wonder if that is because in this text her drawings are meant to be so personal and for a specific purpose, for a prescribed purpose, primarily being to indicate to her father where they are, where her and her brother and mother are located in their journey, in their travels. So again, just a thought there. Now on to Lena Freeman. Lena, you talked about Alexei, the absolutely true diver, part-time Indian, and the notion of race, and that is all over this text. It's everywhere you look on just about any page. It's the idea that Junior Arnold really deals with the perceptions of race throughout the text, and he, of course, desires to escape the res, to kind of be his own person and kind of begin a journey out on his own. One of the things you talked about too with regards to race was the dentist story, that the dentist only gave the Native Americans half the Novocaine because he thought they only felt half the pain. That infuriated me when I read that. I'm just going to be honest. I was so angry because it's totally asinine. It's totally ridiculous. But again, it is an example of how someone in this text perceived another race that was not his own. Of course, you talked a little bit about equating race to poverty. One of the things that I picked up on, though, that you talked a little bit about was the notion of hopelessness, that certain characters in the text are very hopeless and they don't feel as though they can actually do what they want to do. They don't have the hope to do that. Particularly Junior Arnold's parents don't really feel as though they have dreams. They know what they want to do. They know who they want to be, but they ultimately just can't get there, or don't feel as though they can get there. But the Junior obviously has hope. Hence the action of throwing the book at Mr. P's face. It's kind of his act of defiance, saying, this whole education system stuff, I reject it. There has to be something better out there for me. I have to have hope that there's something else out there for me. Hence his move to Reardon. But then, of course, I also thought about Junior's sister, Arnold's sister, moving away from the res to kind of find her own place in the world and kind of finding her own self. And it's really interesting that she does this. She does this and has that hope. But what's interesting is that she, through having that hope and through taking that action, actually ends up dying through it. So I almost wonder if there's some commentary there that equates having hope to the potential of death, or that death is still likely or possible, even if you have hope that you can escape your circumstances. And then, Lena, I also want to touch on briefly, you're talking a little bit about the quality instruction through some of the Bushman and Haas information, and talking about diversity. It is very important that you, as a teacher, you teach texts that are very diverse. One, to be able to introduce your students to texts that are different, that are not necessarily always found in the canon, because sometimes the canon can be older and white, and you don't include as much literature in those, or much of a diverse kind of literature in those texts. But one of the things that you mentioned, and I thought was very, very poignant, was the notion of bringing in relevant and diverse text to let students know that they are not alone. And as adolescents, I think that's really important. Of course, we want to make sure the students get the knowledge and understand exactly what it is that they're doing in school, and that they're getting a breadth and good depth of literature and literary analysis. But we also need to keep in mind too that they're adolescents. They're still trying to figure out who they are and who they want to be. I remember as a teenager, and it hasn't been that many years, it is very confusing. You're trying to figure out who you are, and for me, especially someone who's a book nerd, and a book lover, I looked into a lot of the texts I read to give me some advice. Of course, I got advice from other family members as well, family members and friends, but sometimes when you read something, it can spark something, and spark an interest, and give you new information that you didn't have before. So thank you, Mark and Lena. Your videos were really, really great. I've enjoyed this module a great deal, and I look forward to working with all of you soon. Thanks.